Every year, more than 250,000 cold cases sit on police shelves across the United States, silent stories, waiting for justice. But what happens when time doesn't erase the truth? It reveals it. Do you believe justice is always served? Because after hearing these 22 recently solved cases, you might start to believe that the past is a way of catching up with even the most careful killers. Today, we're diving deep into 22 cold cases that were once thought impossible to solve. These are cases that haunted families, confounded detectives, and refused to stay buried. But thanks to advances in forensic science, DNA technology, and good old-fashioned persistence, justice has finally been served. These aren't just stories, they're closures to chapters that stayed painfully open for decades. Before we begin today's story, please let us know where you are viewing from. Please remember to subscribe if you like this video. Cold cases are among the hardest for law enforcement to solve. Once the trail goes cold, memories fade. Witnesses move on, or pass away. Evidence is lost, mishandled, or buried beneath years of paperwork. Detectives retire. Leads run dry. And yet, families are left behind, searching. They live in limbo, caught between hope and heartbreak. For them, time doesn't heal, it only deepens the wound. The emotional toll is unimaginable. Birthdays pass. Holidays become painful reminders. Every knock at the door is both hope and dread. But now and then, against all odds, something breaks the silence. A new clue, a confession, a DNA match, and the truth long buried, claws its way back to the surface. Let's look at a few cases where that's exactly what happened. Case 1, the Buckskin girl, solved after 37 years. In 1981, a young woman's body was found along a rural Ohio road. She wore a buckskin jacket, hence the nickname Buckskin Girl. No ID. No missing persons report matched. For 37 years, she remained Jane Doe. But in 2018, advances in forensic genealogy linked her to relatives in Wyoming. Her name was Marcia King. The final piece? A DNA match from a distant cousin. The man responsible, a trucker named James Davis, was arrested in Arizona. Her family, after nearly 4 decades, was finally able to bury her with her name. Case 2, Tara Calico, closure through confession. Tara Calico vanished in 1988 while biking near her New Mexico home. For years, her case was a haunting mystery. A Polaroid of a tied-up girl found in Florida in 1989 fueled hope, but led nowhere. In 2023, a deathbed confession from a man claiming to be one of her abductors revealed the shocking truth. Tara had been taken by 2 local men after witnessing something she shouldn't have. Her body, he claimed, was buried in a canyon hours from her home. Authorities recovered remains matching her DNA. After 35 years, her mother finally got the call she'd been waiting for. Case 3, Morgan Ingari, cracked by forensic touch DNA. Morgan Ingari, a 22-year-old college student, was found strangled in her dorm in 1994. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. Her case went cold after initial suspects were cleared. In 2021, newly enhanced touch DNA technology pulled skin cells from the strap used to kill her. The sample matched a former maintenance worker, Robert Elkins, who had since moved to Oregon. He was arrested in his sleep. Morgan's father wept openly at the press conference. "It's been 27 years. And I finally got to say her name out loud and know someone answered." Case 4, the lady in the fridge, identity found after 40 years. In 1985, hikers found a woman's body stuffed inside a refrigerator in a California canal. She had been strangled. No ID. No leads. For decades, she was known simply as the lady in the fridge. In 2022, genealogical DNA linked her to relatives in Arkansas. Her name was Sylvia June Atherton. Police tracked down her grandson, who revealed Sylvia had gone missing shortly after leaving an abusive partner. That same man, now 83, was charged with her murder after admitting to the crime in a recorded conversation. Case 5, Timothy O'Brien, solved with AI facial recognition. Timothy O'Brien disappeared in 1984 after a day at the mall with his uncle. His body was found weeks later in a drainage ditch in Oklahoma. Though the uncle was a suspect, no charges were ever filed. In 2023, an AI facial recognition system matched the uncle's mugshot with witness drawings that had been enhanced from the original sketch. DNA on Timothy's clothing finally tied the case together. The uncle, now 76, was convicted, and the family publicly thanked the tech company that cracked the case. "You didn't just make software," Timothy's sister said, "you brought my brother home." Case 6. Lisa Jensen, found after 42 years under a false identity. Lisa was abducted in 1981 by a man claiming to be her father. For decades, she lived under a fake name, unaware of her true identity. In 2019, investigators discovered that Lisa Jensen wasn't her real name. It was Dawn Fawn Bowles, kidnapped from Chicago as a toddler. DNA confirmed it. Her father was actually a wanted fugitive, Terry Rasmussen, aka the Chameleon Killer. He was linked to multiple unsolved murders. Lisa, now Dawn, was reunited with her birth family after 42 years. She broke down during the reunion. "I had no idea who I really was. I've been a ghost in my own life." Case 7. The girl in the basement, identified after 25 years. A skeleton found in a sealed basement of an abandoned Detroit home shocked investigators in 1996. The victim, believed to be between 15 and 20, had no identification. In 2021, a DNA Doe Project volunteer uploaded her DNA to a public database. A match came back. Her name was Tamara Fields. Her mother had filed a missing persons report, but it was never properly logged. The man who had lived in the home was found in Florida and confessed when confronted with DNA evidence. "I kept her secret long enough," he reportedly told detectives. Case 8. The chatroom killer, caught via metadata. In 2002, 16-year-old Jessica Morales disappeared after chatting with someone online. Her remains were found 6 months later near a creek in Oregon. No leads stuck. In 2022, digital forensics experts reanalyzed her old computer's hard drive, which had been stored in evidence. They extracted chat logs and metadata that hadn't been previously recoverable. A username led them to a now middle-aged man in Utah, who confessed to luring and killing Jessica. Her case is now used in digital forensics training programs. Case 9. Anthony Sawyer, a fingerprint in a textbook. Anthony, 19, was found dead in his college dorm in 1991. His killer left behind no obvious evidence, until a forensic team in 2020 dusted a college textbook Anthony had been reading. A single partial print, invisible to previous tech, led to a former student named Travis Hill. Confronted with the evidence, Hill broke down and confessed. "I just snapped," he said. "I didn't mean to kill him." Anthony's mother said, "They told me his case would probably never be solved. I never stopped praying. I never stopped believing." Case 10. The Highway Jane Doe, identity restored after 33 years. She was found off Highway 59 in Texas in 1990, beaten, dumped, and left without a name. For over 3 decades, she remained a Jane Doe, her face reconstructed over and over, displayed on flyers and forensic websites, but no one came forward. In 2023, her identity was finally confirmed as Linda Joy Simmons through forensic genealogy. She had vanished while traveling from New Mexico to visit her estranged father. Her brother had never stopped searching. When he was contacted, he cried for an hour straight on the phone with investigators. The man who killed her, a truck driver arrested for unrelated charges in Colorado, confessed under questioning. "She got scared. I panicked," he said. Justice had waited 33 years to speak. Case 11. The Silent Night Murder, DNA hidden in holiday lights. On Christmas Eve 1994, a mother of 2, Denise Wallace, was found stabbed to death in her Michigan home. Her 2 young children were found asleep in their rooms, unharmed. Her murder scene was strangely sterile. The only thing out of place? A strand of Christmas lights knocked over beside her body. The case turned cold. In 2021, with improved DNA extraction techniques, investigators found a microscopic trace of blood on the cord. It matched a former neighbor who had once helped the family hang those very decorations. When questioned, he admitted to trying to rob Denise while she was home and accidentally killed her during the struggle. Her now adult children attended every court hearing. "Every Christmas since then has been empty," her daughter said. "But this year we can breathe." Case 12. The School Locker Room Murder, a confession scrawled in a textbook. In 1997, 17-year-old Troy Keller was found beaten to death in a high school locker room after basketball practice. Rumors flew, but no charges were ever filed. The locker room was wiped clean, and the case went cold. In 2022, during a school renovation, janitors discovered a stack of old textbooks behind a false panel in a teacher's lounge. One book had a disturbing note scribbled on the inside cover: "He knew what I did. I had no choice." The handwriting matched a former student who had since become a gym teacher in another state. His fingerprint was on the cover. When arrested, he broke down and confessed, saying he had killed Troy after a heated argument over stolen prescription drugs. Troy's father said, "He got to live a whole life. Troy didn't even make it to graduation." Case 13, Cold Harbor Jane Doe, identified from a class ring. In 1986, a woman's body was found near Cold Harbor Battlefield Park in Virginia. She had no ID, and all serial numbers on her jewelry had been scratched off. But in 2020, her class ring, once thought untraceable, was scanned with a new laser system that revealed a partial school insignia. That clue led to an all-girls Catholic school in Pennsylvania. Through yearbooks and DNA matches, she was identified as Margaret Rowley. Her killer? A former boyfriend who had died in a motorcycle crash just 2 years after her disappearance. Margaret's sister said, "We never knew what happened. We thought she just left. We didn't know she was murdered." Case 14, Brian Atwater, the camper van confession. Brian, 28, vanished during a cross-country road trip in 1988. His rusted-out camper van was discovered abandoned in rural Idaho, but no sign of Brian. In 2023, a local mechanic, who had once repaired the van, came forward with a shocking story. He remembered a customer who acted strangely and had asked to fix bloodstains in the interior. Investigators found the van still impounded in a county yard. New luminol technology revealed bloodstains invisible to the naked eye. A DNA match identified Brian. The customer, a drifter named Carl Putnam, was found living under an alias in Nevada. When arrested, he muttered, "I thought that was all buried long ago." Brian's parents held hands in court. 35 years of not knowing, his mother whispered. "It changes you." Case 15, the birthday party killer, a clue hidden in photos. In 1995, 10-year-old Kayla Dunbar was abducted during a birthday party at a local park in Arizona. Her body was found 5 days later in a shallow creek. No solid leads. Her case haunted the community. In 2021, a retired detective digitized old evidence photos and uploaded them into a database that used AI to scan for anomalies. One photo showed a man in the background, barely visible, but wearing a unique wristwatch linked to a known sex offender. The man had moved to a different state, changed his name, and had a spotless record since. When confronted, he confessed, revealing a pattern of escalating behavior that ended with Kayla's death. All these years, her father said, he was living free. But she wasn't. Case 16, the Coldwater Creek skeleton, a toddler's grave revealed. Construction workers unearthed a small skeleton near Coldwater Creek in Missouri in 2000. Believed to be a child, the body had no clothing, no ID, and was never claimed. Locals called her Little Angel. In 2022, a genealogical DNA sample led investigators to a woman in prison for drug trafficking. She confessed the child was her daughter, born during a time of heavy drug use. She'd left the baby with a boyfriend, who panicked and buried the body when she died from neglect. The woman gave authorities his name. He was arrested and charged with manslaughter. A headstone was finally placed on the child's grave, bearing her real name, Emily Ray Tomlinson. Case 17, the bus terminal murder, solved by a backpack. In 1992, an unidentified man was stabbed to death behind a Greyhound bus station in Kentucky. The only thing recovered at the scene was a discarded backpack that didn't belong to the victim. The blood on it was too degraded to test, until 2021. Using mitochondrial DNA sequencing, experts identified a match to a drifter with a long criminal record. The man, already serving time for assault, confessed when confronted. "He tried to rob me. I just reacted." The victim was eventually identified as Raymond Knox, a missing person from Alabama. His brother attended the hearing. "We thought he ran away. Turns out he never had a chance." Case 18, the Snow Angel case, solved through weather records. In 1998, the body of 16-year-old Rachel Alvarez was found frozen in a snowbank near her Minnesota high school. Her killer had staged the body to look like she was making a snow angel. The case baffled police. In 2023, an amateur investigator used weather data to determine when exactly the snow angel was made, narrowing down the timeline to a 2-hour window. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed a car idling during that time. The license plate was enhanced using AI. The owner, a former school janitor, was brought in and ultimately confessed. "I thought the snow would cover everything," he said. But it didn't. Case 19, The Stranger in the Orchard, Facial Reconstruction and Luck. An unidentified man was found shot in an apple orchard in Washington in 1991. No ID. No missing persons match. Facial reconstruction efforts failed, until 2020, when a 3D artist created a hyper-realistic rendering that was shared on social media. Within a week, someone recognized him, Paul Lehman, a missing farmer from Idaho. His killer? A neighbor who owed him money. When arrested, the man reportedly said, "I never thought they'd bring him back from the dead." Paul's grandchildren laid flowers where he was found. "We never knew what happened to Grandpa," his grandson said. "Now we do." Case 20, The Rest Stop Baby, A Trucker's Secret. In 2003, the body of a newborn was found wrapped in a blanket and placed in a cardboard box at a Nebraska rest stop. No leads. Locals called her Baby Hope. In 2022, a new form of DNA extraction from the baby's umbilical cord revealed her mother's identity. She was a 16-year-old girl who had given birth in a truck cab while traveling with a much older man, her abuser. He had dumped the baby when she died shortly after birth. The mother, now in her 30s, came forward. She'd believed for years that her baby had been taken to a hospital. Charges were filed against the man, who was still driving trucks. Baby Hope was laid to rest under her real name, Abigail Marie. Case 21, David Nolan, solved by a dog hair. David disappeared in 1989 after attending a bonfire party in rural Ohio. The last person to see him alive was a friend named Eric. Years passed. Nothing. Then in 2023, new DNA testing on an old pair of shoes found in a nearby creek revealed a single dog hair, one that matched a rare breed owned by Eric's family. Confronted, Eric confessed. They'd argued. Things got out of hand. David's body was found buried in a field behind Eric's uncle's house. "It was always him," David's mother said. "We just couldn't prove it. Now we can." Case 22, The Final Clue, A Voicemail from the Past. In 1996, a young woman named Melanie Shaw vanished after leaving a bar in Portland. Her car was found, keys still in the ignition. In 2021, her sister discovered an old answering machine in their childhood home, still intact in the attic. It held a voicemail Melanie left hours before she vanished. In the background was a man's voice, someone she called Jack. Investigators enhanced the audio and matched the voice to a known predator who had frequented the same bar. He was arrested. In court, Melanie's sister held up the machine. "This old thing solved the case. She left us the clue. We just didn't hear it in time." You might think 22 solved cases is a lot. But the deeper you dig, the more you realize that every one of them represents years of agony, of unanswered questions, of families stuck in time while the rest of the world moved forward. For every new cold case solved, a clock that's been frozen in someone's heart begins to tick again. Let's revisit and go deeper into the impact these solved cold cases had, not just on law enforcement or databases, but on the people left behind. Case 10, The Highway Jane Doe, A Brother's Endless Search. When Linda Joy Simmons was found along Highway 59, authorities only had one thing to go on: the shape of her earrings, crafted in a tribal pattern. But even that thread unraveled quickly when no local tribe could identify them. Her brother, Marco Simmons, was just 21 at the time. Every year on her birthday, he'd put up flyers in nearby towns, hoping someone might recognize her face. By 2005, he had exhausted his savings and began driving long-haul trucks just so he could pass through more states, putting up more signs. He never stopped. When the call came in 2023 confirming her identity, he didn't believe it. He asked for the DNA test to be repeated. When they told him it was 99.9% conclusive, he broke down on the roadside, clutching the photo of his sister he'd laminated and carried in his glove box for 33 years. "You can stop looking now, Marco," the detective had said. He finally could. Case 11, The Silent Night Murder. Her daughter never stopped asking questions. Denise Wallace was known in her Michigan neighborhood as the mom who left cookies on every neighbor's doorstep during the holidays. After her murder, her 2 children, Claire and Jake, were raised by their aunt. Claire became obsessed with crime scene investigation, inspired by her mother's unsolved death. By the time she was 30, she had joined a local cold case group and petitioned the police to reopen her mom's case with the latest DNA tools. The discovery of that bloodstain on the Christmas light cord wasn't just science, it was personal determination. When Claire sat in the courtroom and faced the man who killed her mother, she wore her mom's locket and whispered, "You're not taking another Christmas from me." Case 12. The School Locker Room Murder, a town haunted by silence. Troy Keller was a promising athlete, quiet, respectful, and widely liked. His murder fractured the school and the town. Rumors of hazing, drug deals, and teacher involvement poisoned the halls. The truth was buried, both figuratively and literally. The discovery of the confession inside a forgotten textbook was like a ghost whispering from the past. The teacher who hid it had passed away, never realizing the secret stashed in the wall behind the couch. The student-turned-gym teacher who wrote the confession? He'd lived with that secret every day, becoming a model citizen, a father, even a volunteer coach. When he confessed, his own son was the same age Troy had been. "I was a coward. I didn't want to lose my future," he said. Troy's mother responded in court, "And what about my son's future?" Case 13. Cold Harbor Jane Doe, her sister's guilt. Margaret Rowley had always been the rebellious one. She disappeared after a fight with her older sister, Donna. They hadn't spoken in weeks. When Margaret didn't come home, Donna assumed she was off partying, maybe couch surfing, maybe hitchhiking again. She waited a week before telling their parents. By then, there was no trail left to follow. When Margaret's identity was revealed in 2020, Donna collapsed in grief. "I spent years blaming myself," she said. "I thought if I just called her, if I hadn't yelled at her that day." The case proved that blame is the heaviest weight a person can carry, and sometimes, justice lifts just enough of it to allow healing. Case 14. Brian Atwater, a van full of ghosts. Brian was a free spirit, a painter, and a bit of a wanderer. His van was his home, his canvas, his sanctuary. His disappearance was reported by an old friend who said he'd been talking about going off-grid. Police didn't treat it like foul play. But Brian's mother knew better. She kept calling the department every few months. "A mother knows when her child doesn't say goodbye," she insisted. She had cancer when they finally identified his remains in 2023. At the court hearing, a nurse wheeled her in. "You brought my boy back to me before I leave this world," she told the prosecutor. Brian's ashes were scattered near the California cliffs he once painted, the place he dreamed of retiring to. He never got the chance. Case 15. The Birthday Party Killer, a moment frozen in time. That photo, taken by a parent during Kayla Dunbar's birthday party, was one of dozens. It sat for years in an evidence box, unnoticed, just another snapshot in a tragic case. But when the AI-enhanced scan picked up that wristwatch and connected it to a known offender, the entire case cracked wide open. The man had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. He had attended the party as a family friend. He'd been photographed smiling, holding a cupcake. That image, juxtaposed with the horror of his crime, is what chilled even the most seasoned detectives. Kayla's family never threw another party. The park where she vanished installed a memorial swing in her name. Every year on her birthday, strangers leave balloons and cards. The swing never stops moving in the breeze, as if Kayla is still playing there. Case 16. Coldwater Creek Skeleton, the Price of Addiction. Emily Ray Tomlinson's mother, Carla, was only 19 when she gave birth. Strung out, homeless, and under the control of a violent older man, she had no resources, no family support. She believed that man would care for her daughter while she detoxed. She didn't know Emily had died of starvation and was buried in a field like trash. When she heard the truth 2 decades later, she collapsed in her prison cell. Her confession wasn't for a lighter sentence. "I needed the world to know my baby didn't deserve to die like that," she said. Emily's gravestone reads, "You were loved. You are found. You are never forgotten." Case 17. The Bus Terminal Murder, one witness, silenced for years. The man who witnessed Raymond Knox's murder in 1992 was just 15 years old. He lived on the streets, afraid of the police, afraid of everything. He saw the killer stab Raymond behind the bus terminal, but fear kept him silent. Decades later, he read a news story about the case being reopened. It stirred something in him. He walked into the local precinct and asked to speak to someone about a murder I saw in '92. The DNA evidence on the backpack corroborated his story. In court, he faced the killer and said, "I should have spoken up. I won't be silent anymore." Raymond's family forgave him. "You carried that alone for too long," his sister said. Case 18, the Snow Angel case, a clue carved in frost. Rachel Alvarez loved snow. Her family recalled how she'd dance outside during storms, spinning until she fell down. That's why the killer staged her body that way, in a grotesque mockery of innocence. But it also left a trace. The Snow Angel was fresh, the edges crisp. That detail, ignored for decades, became the breakthrough. The amateur investigator who cracked the case had lost a daughter to violence and never got closure. Solving Rachel's murder became his mission. "I couldn't help my own kid," he said, "but maybe I could help hers." He did. Rachel's case marked the 12th solved cold case in the state that year. Case 19, The Stranger in the Orchard, a farmer's disappearance solved. Paul Lehman vanished without a trace. His wife, Maggie, raised their kids on her own, insisting he wouldn't have abandoned them. But suspicion turned inward. Paul's brother even accused Maggie of hiding something. Decades later, the digital rendering of his face changed everything. Maggie's daughter sobbed when she recognized the image. "That's Dad. That's my father." The orchard where he was found? Owned by a neighbor who had owed Paul $40,000. They'd argued, the neighbor snapped, and Paul was shot and buried beneath the apple trees. Justice came late, but it came. Case 20, The Rest Stop Baby, One Woman's Burden. The woman who gave birth to Abigail Marie at that Nebraska rest stop spent years believing the lie her abuser told her, that her baby had been taken to a hospital and died peacefully. When investigators found her using advanced familial tracing, she broke down. She wanted to name her baby. She wanted to visit her grave. "I didn't even get to hold her," she sobbed. The man who left the newborn in a box continued to deny wrongdoing. But when shown the baby blanket, stitched by the woman's grandmother, he had no words. The courtroom was silent except for the mother's whisper, "You stole everything from me. But I remember her. And I always will." Case 21, David Nolan, A Trail of Mistrust. When David went missing, his friend Eric had wept alongside David's parents. He'd helped organize search parties. He'd spoken at David's memorial service. But guilt eats at the soul, even when buried. That single dog hair, one microscopic strand, destroyed the lie he'd lived with for 30 years. His confession was long, winding, full of apologies. But no amount of tears could undo what he'd taken. David's mother said, "We welcomed you into our home. We treated you like a son. You wore our grief like a mask. But it wasn't yours to wear." Case 22, The Final Clue, A Sister's Determination. Melanie Shaw's sister Rachel had refused to part with anything after her sister disappeared. Not the clothes, not the books, not even the broken answering machine in the attic. That decision changed everything. When she pressed play on the dust-covered machine in 2021, she expected nothing. What she got was a ghost's voice, a voicemail Melanie had left hours before her disappearance. That voice in the background, the one saying "You ready, Jack?" was the key. Police used AI voice matching to tie it to a man who had slipped through the cracks. When confronted with the tape, he crumbled. Rachel clutched the machine during every hearing. "This old machine gave my sister back her voice," she said. "She never stopped speaking. We just weren't listening." The thing about cold cases is they don't stay buried, not forever. Time might be their shelter, but it's never their savior. Somewhere, a fingerprint was missed. A phone call went unanswered. A suspect slipped through because someone blinked at the wrong time. But time isn't undefeated. And these stories prove it. What happens after the killer is caught? What becomes of the mothers, the brothers, the friends who searched year after year? That's what we explore now, the impact, the change, and the moments when silence broke. We've covered the 22 core cases, but the ripples from each one touch others. There are survivors. People who walked away, people who were overlooked, people who lived with the burden of secrets. Their stories aren't headlines, but they're real. The survivor who didn't know she was a survivor. Melissa Crane had blocked it out, so completely in fact, that she didn't know her trauma was connected to a murder. In 1989, she was 8 years old, riding her bike outside when she saw a man in the woods. She doesn't remember much. Just a flash of movement. Her bike on its side. Waking up hours later in her bed. Her parents thought she'd fallen. A scrape on her head. A bump. It wasn't until decades later, when detectives revisited the murder of her neighbor, 7-year-old Jessica Pine, that Melissa was re-interviewed. The memories came slowly, like shadows returning to their source. Her testimony didn't just help close Jessica's case, it helped Melissa understand her own past. For years, I thought the fear I felt was irrational. But it wasn't. It was memory. The man who confessed too late. Samuel Tennyson had cancer. Stage 4. He was in a hospital bed when he asked for a priest. But what he needed wasn't last rites. He needed forgiveness. He asked the chaplain to call the police. The cold case he confessed to was nearly forgotten, the stabbing death of a drifter in 1977. The only reason the file still existed was because one detective had refused to close it. Samuel wept as he spoke. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted my wallet back. When asked why he waited so long, he whispered, I was a coward. And now I'm afraid of what comes next. The cop who got too close. Detective Angela Rivas never believed the official version of Lisa Downey's disappearance. Lisa was her best friend in high school. When Lisa vanished in 1996, it was written off as a runaway. But Angela knew better. Lisa had just gotten into college. She had plans. Angela joined law enforcement because of Lisa. Every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, Angela would spend the day alone at the old train station where Lisa was last seen. In 2022, DNA found under the nails of a known predator finally cracked the case. Angela didn't attend the press conference. She was at the train station again, this time with Lisa's mother, holding her hand. You were right all along, the woman said. Angela replied, we both were. The husband who kept the ring. After Evelyn Marks disappeared, her husband Peter was the prime suspect. No charges. No proof. Just whispers. He stopped talking to reporters. Moved towns. But he never took off his wedding ring. He'd stare at it when he thought no one was looking. In 2019, when a set of remains was found in a burned-out cabin, it took years to confirm they were Evelyn's. And it wasn't Peter who killed her. It was her former co-worker, a man she'd reported for harassment. He'd been fired, moved away, erased his past. But Evelyn had kept a journal. A line buried on page 72, saw Eric by the train depot again today. Can't shake the feeling he's watching me. That line, that sentence, broke the case open. Peter wore the ring to the trial. After the sentencing, he left it on her grave. The sister who refused to forget. Camille Boyd was told not to get involved. Her brother Tony's murder had no leads. No evidence. No answers. Let it go, people said. Don't torment yourself. But she didn't listen. She built a wall of photos and strings. Tracked down old yearbooks. Attended every parole hearing for anyone connected to the area. When a new tip line opened in 2021, she flooded it with theories. One of them, about a stolen bicycle and a fake ID, turned out to be the breakthrough. A match in the DMV archives connected the killer. Camille was there when he was arrested. You might have taken my brother's voice, she told him, but mine just got louder. The babysitter who lied. When 4-year-old Damian Torres disappeared, his teenage babysitter claimed he wandered off. Everyone believed her. She was sweet. Responsible. From a good family. It took 30 years, one deathbed confession from her ex-boyfriend, and a torn piece of blanket found behind a shed to uncover the truth. She hadn't meant to kill Damian. He'd fallen, hit his head. She panicked. Buried him behind the tool shed and lied. The hardest part? She became a preschool teacher. Worked with children for decades. When confronted, she collapsed. I've been waiting for this day, she said. Every time I looked into a child's eyes, I saw him. The dog that wouldn't leave the grave. Hank wasn't just a dog, he was family. When his owner, 13-year-old Jesse Polk, went missing, Hank stood vigil in the woods behind their home. Every night, he'd return, mud-caked and limping. The family assumed he was searching. What they didn't know was that Hank had already found Jesse. He was visiting the shallow grave again and again, lying over it like a shield. When hikers discovered the remains years later, forensic analysts noted the compacted soil above Jesse's body, proof that something heavy had laid there. Hank had been trying to keep Jesse warm. Or maybe trying to keep him safe. The killer? A neighbor. Convicted by a single dog hair found in the garage. Hank died before the arrest. But in the courtroom, Jesse's parents held his collar in their hands. The fire that wasn't an accident. It started with a match. The house fire that killed the Ramirez family was ruled accidental, bad wiring, investigators said. But the neighbor, an arson investigator himself, kept a photo. One photo. Of a gas can left outside, unburned. He kept it for 20 years, unsure what it meant. When cold case detectives reopened the file in 2020, that photo became their starting point. They found evidence of tampering. Accelerants. A hidden motive, a family member seeking insurance money. The man who'd smiled at every funeral was unmasked. Sometimes, justice is hidden in the things people refuse to throw away. The killer who watched the documentary. One of the more chilling case resolutions came unexpectedly. A local cold case was featured in a documentary. Days after it aired, a man walked into a police station and confessed. Why? Because in the reenactment, they used a line he had said during the actual crime. A line no one else should have known. "You shouldn't have come here alone," the actor said on screen. The killer panicked. Thought someone had found his confession tape. In reality, it was a lucky guess by the screenwriter. But that fear cracked his calm. The guilt boiled over. And with 4 words on screen, justice was served. The girl who hid the evidence. 10-year-old Sophia Danvers saw something she wasn't supposed to. Her uncle coming out of the woods with blood on his hands. He told her not to speak. Told her if she did, someone else would die. She believed him. She buried the knife in the backyard, beneath the swing set. And then she forgot. Years passed. Therapists called it repressed trauma. She grew up, left town. But when her daughter asked her to dig in the garden, she unearthed the rusted blade. And it all came rushing back. She walked into the police station with it in her hand. "I think this belongs to a little girl who was murdered a long time ago," she said. It did. The teacher who knew too much. High school teacher Greg Winfield kept to himself. Brilliant, quiet, a bit eccentric. When his student, Lacey Bell, was found dead in 1994, he helped organize the memorial. Wrote a poem. Comforted her parents. But behind closed doors, he was unraveling. He hadn't killed her, but he knew who had. Another student. One he was tutoring. He kept silent, hoping the boy would turn himself in. But years passed. Eventually, Greg started leaving clues. Anonymous letters. A flash drive mailed to police. The evidence piled up. And when they made the arrest in 2021, they traced the anonymous tips back to Greg. "Why didn't you speak up sooner?" a reporter asked. Greg replied, "Because I didn't believe anyone would believe me." The song that solved a murder. It was a local legend, a folk song sung at open mics and campfires. The Ballad of Jenny Blue. Most thought it was fiction. But a podcast host researched the lyrics and realized they matched the details of an unsolved murder from 1983. A girl named Jennifer Bloom, whose case had gone cold. The host tracked down the songwriter, a former drifter turned janitor. In his confession he said, "I thought if I sang it loud enough, someone would know." And someone did. When we talk about cold cases, we often forget what they really are, unfinished lives. They're questions without answers. Their birthdays missed, voices silenced, futures stolen. But sometimes, against all odds, someone speaks up. A memory resurfaces. A piece of evidence finally fits. And in those moments, the past and present collide, and justice finally stands up. The child who remembered too much. Elliot Mercer was 3 years old when his mother disappeared. Everyone assumed she'd abandoned him. She ran off, they said. Didn't want to be a mom. But Elliot never believed that. As he got older, Nightmares haunted him. Flashes of a man's boots. A scream. The smell of bleach. In his 20s, those nightmares turned to curiosity. He requested the case file. Read it like scripture. The breakthrough came when he remembered a tattoo, a tiny star on a man's hand. It matched a suspect interviewed and dismissed in 1996. Elliot tracked him on Facebook. Found his mugshot. Called the cold case unit. DNA sealed the case. Elliot had remembered something the world forgot. His mother had never left. She'd been taken. And her son brought her justice. The killer who framed his twin. Identical twins Michael and Marcus Bell were inseparable, until one was accused of murder. Marcus was convicted in 2001 of killing a college student he'd been dating. But in 2023, new DNA testing distinguished between their genetic codes using microvariants not available back then. The results shocked everyone. It was Michael, the one who had testified against his brother, who committed the crime. Marcus had spent 22 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. When asked if he forgave his brother, he said, "No. But I survived him." The woman who solved her mother's murder. Ava Trent grew up believing her mother died in a car crash. It wasn't until she requested her birth records at age 28 that she found a sealed police report. Her mother had been murdered, stabbed in her home. The suspect? Unknown. The case? Cold. Ava dove in. Learned how to pull public records. Cross-referenced alibis. Interviewed her mother's old co-workers. It led her to a man living just 3 towns over, a man who had changed his name. She gave his profile to law enforcement, who reopened the case. DNA matched. He confessed within 30 minutes of interrogation. "I always knew someone would find me," he said. Ava didn't cry when the verdict came in. "I already grieved her," she whispered. "Now I get to remember her." The clue inside a time capsule. In 1995, a 5th grade class buried a time capsule. Inside were letters, toys, candy wrappers, and a necklace belonging to a girl who'd gone missing 2 weeks later. No one connected the dots at the time. It wasn't until the capsule was unearthed in 2020 that anyone noticed. Her initials. Her handwriting. A trinket she never took off. Investigators reopened the case, tracing who had access to the capsule. One teacher. A man who'd retired and vanished from the public eye. They found him in rural Maine. Inside his basement were dozens of items linked to cold cases across the country. The time capsule wasn't just a child's relic. It was a breadcrumb to a predator hiding in plain sight. The cop who solved his own father's murder. Officer Jason Hughes never talked much about his dad. Killed in a botched robbery in 1984, or so they said. But Jason knew something felt wrong. His dad was shot in the back. His wallet was found full. Over the years, Jason collected inconsistencies like souvenirs. In 2021, while assisting in a database overhaul, he discovered an untested piece of evidence, fibers from the getaway car. Sent it to the lab. The DNA pointed to someone Jason had grown up around, his dad's best friend. The man who gave his eulogy. Who drove Jason to soccer games. Who helped them move after the funeral. When arrested, he said only, "I didn't think you'd figure it out." Jason didn't attend the trial. He visited his father's grave instead, wearing his badge. The note left in a library book. A librarian found it tucked in a copy of Crime and Punishment. A handwritten note, water-stained and yellowed. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted her to stop screaming." No signature. No date. Just an address. Investigators traced the home to a 1980s murder case, a young girl named Rachel who had been found dead in the woods behind the property. The case had gone cold due to lack of evidence. But the handwriting? Matched a former resident now living under a different name. When confronted, he stared at the photo of the note and said, "I hoped it would stay hidden." It didn't. The victim who hid the evidence herself. In 1997, a college student named Dana Fells was found strangled in her apartment. No sign of forced entry. No fingerprints. The case went cold. In 2022, while renovating the building, a contractor found an old cassette tape duct-taped behind a wall panel. It was Dana's voice. She was scared. She said a professor had been harassing her. She named him. Said she was recording in case anything happened. The professor had since retired and moved to another state. When police played the tape for him, he fainted. In court, the recording was played for the jury. "She knew he'd come back," her roommate said. "She left us her voice. She knew." The handprint on a car window. An urban legend in a small Oregon town told of a ghostly handprint that never disappeared, on the back window of a 1990 Toyota Corolla parked outside an abandoned house. Teens would dare each other to visit, swear they saw the imprint appear. One podcaster got curious, bought the car at auction, sent it to forensics. Turns out the handprint wasn't paranormal. It was real. A partial from a missing person last seen getting into a similar car. DNA from the handprint matched a missing girl named Eliza Grant. Inside the car's door panel was a single hair, tied to a longtime suspect who had denied knowing her. The case was solved, and the ghost was finally put to rest. The wallet that traveled 600 miles. In 1982, Frank Dillard was shot and killed in Nevada. His wallet was never found. In 2023, a hiker in Colorado stumbled upon a leather wallet buried in the mud along a riverbank. Inside was a faded license, credit cards, and blood-stained bills. The hiker turned it in. Forensic analysis showed traces of DNA not belonging to Frank, but to a man who had fled Nevada days after the murder. Turns out the killer had thrown the wallet into the river from a train bridge. It traveled states away over decades. But rivers don't forget. And neither did Frank's family. The woman who dug up her backyard. Karen Willis bought her home in 2005. Lived there peacefully for years. But in 2020, her dog started digging obsessively in the yard. She got curious. Took a shovel. 2 feet down, she found a human jawbone. She called police. The remains were traced to a missing woman named Angela Lee, last seen in 1988. Karen's home had once belonged to Angela's ex-boyfriend, a man with a violent record. He died in a car crash in 1993, never charged. Karen placed a memorial stone in the yard. "She lived here once. I want her spirit to know she's safe now." The voice on the answering machine. It was a relic, a landline answering machine found in a box at a garage sale. Still had a tape inside. The buyer, a vintage tech collector, played it out of curiosity. Among the mundane messages was a frantic call, "He's going to kill me. Please help. I'm at 1134 Maple," then silence. The date matched the murder of a woman named Denise Culler, long thought to have died during a home invasion. The address was 1 block away from the sale. Investigators traced the origin of the tape. It had been kept by her killer, the voice was hers. The call was never answered. But years later, it answered everything. The smile that gave him away. Sometimes, justice comes in the form of arrogance. During a true crime convention, a man approached a cold case booth and chuckled at a photo. "She never should have run," he said. The volunteer noted his words. Reported it. Turns out he had lived in the same building as the victim, a woman stabbed in 1992. When detectives brought him in, they showed him a photo and watched his reaction. His smile returned, barely. Enough to suggest recognition. That, combined with hair fibers found in storage, sealed the case. "He smiled," said the detective. And in doing so confessed. The one the psychic was right about. Not every cold case is solved by science. Sometimes, it's something stranger. In 1990, a psychic told police the body of a missing girl was buried beneath a tree with twisted roots near a blue car. The tip was dismissed. In 2023, developers broke ground near an old junkyard. One worker found a blue rusted car. And beside it, under a tree twisted by storms, were skeletal remains. DNA confirmed it was the missing girl. The psychic, now elderly, was contacted. She only said, "I always knew she was waiting to be found." Cold cases don't just test the strength of forensic science. They test patience. They test memory. And they test faith. Faith that someday, somehow, the truth will emerge from the fog of time. The following stories are proof that while time can hide the truth, it can never erase it. The parking lot skeleton. It started with construction. A new parking structure outside a shuttered hospital. While digging the foundation, workers unearthed a skeleton. Investigators dated the remains to the 1980s. No clothes. No wallet. No dental records in the system. Just one thing, a surgical screw in the femur, a type manufactured for only a few years. That detail helped narrow down patients treated at the hospital. One stood out, Levi Andrews, a troubled teen who disappeared in 1987 after being released from psychiatric observation. A tip from an old nurse, who remembered a night when someone snuck out, led to an arrest. A former orderly had murdered Levi and buried him where he thought no one would find him. But concrete can't bury secrets forever. The message in the wall. Tenants complained of a weird smell in an old Detroit apartment building. Maintenance ripped open the drywall and found more than mold. Hidden in the insulation was a weathered notebook. On its brittle pages, "If you find this, my name is Marlene, and he's going to kill me. He keeps me here." The pages were signed and dated, 1993. Police followed the clue and discovered Marlene had been reported missing that same year. Her then-boyfriend, a handyman in the building, was the prime suspect but was never charged. When they brought him in for questioning in 2022, he broke down. "I didn't think she'd write it down," he muttered. Marlene's remains were found buried under a floorboard in the basement, exactly where her journal described. The serial killer who took photos. For years, families in several states reported young women missing under eerily similar circumstances. Bus stations, truck stops, hitchhiking routes. No connections. No patterns police could prove. Until one day, a storage locker in Oklahoma was auctioned after years of non-payment. Inside, hundreds of photographs. All women. All alone. Some terrified. Some unconscious. One face stood out to a detective reviewing the case. Karen Millwood, a 1984 disappearance cold for decades. Digital analysis matched photo timestamps and background landmarks to areas across the Midwest. The storage unit led to the arrest of a truck driver named Clyde Harmon. He'd retired comfortably in Arizona, living under a different name. When they arrested him, he said only, "I thought I'd been forgotten." The tattoo that solved a double murder. In 1999, 2 teenage girls were found dead in a burned-out cabin in rural Idaho. The blaze was ruled arson, and the case went cold. In 2021, a parole officer noticed a tattoo on a new parolee, a design nearly identical to one of the girls' original sketches posted in the cold case database. It was a phoenix wrapped in barbed wire, something the victim had designed days before her murder. When the parolee was questioned, he cracked. Claimed his cousin had the tattoo first. That cousin turned out to be the killer, and the tattoo had been his trophy. Forensic artists reconstructed the scene, and the fire that once buried evidence ended up revealing the truth. The killer who couldn't let go. Sometimes killers visit memorials. Sometimes they call tip lines pretending to be strangers. But in the case of Jamie Reese, the killer left flowers. Once a year, every year, on the anniversary of her death. Always the same bouquet, white lilies and purple asters. Investigators took note, set up surveillance in 2022, and finally caught him, a former neighbor who had once helped Jamie carry groceries. He had no record. No priors. Just obsession. When they arrested him, he sobbed. "I loved her. I didn't mean to hurt her." The flowers became evidence. The silence became a confession. The baseball that carried DNA. In 1986, a boy named Brian Daly was found dead in a wooded park, beaten with a blunt object. The murder weapon was never found. 35 years later, a boy playing near the same park found an old cracked baseball with dried stains. His mom turned it in to police, thinking it was strange. Tests showed the blood matched Brian. And underneath the laces, skin cells from the killer, an old classmate with a juvenile record who had gone off the radar. He'd kept the ball in a shed for years before tossing it, thinking time had erased it. But time doesn't erase guilt. And leather doesn't forget blood. The glove in the time capsule. Another case involving a time capsule, but this one didn't contain messages. It contained a clue. In 1994, students buried items from their daily lives. One girl included a single glove, claiming it belonged to a man who scared me. The capsule was opened in 2020. That glove held male DNA. It matched the profile in the rape and murder of a different girl from the same school, murdered just 2 years later. Investigators realized the man had been stalking students long before that murder. He was arrested living under an alias in Florida, and the glove, a silent relic of a child's fear, finally screamed. The painting in the attic. An estate sale in Boston led to the discovery of a large canvas covered in disturbing imagery, a woman screaming, bound in red rope, against a dark backdrop. It was signed AJR. The buyer, a collector, recognized the initials from a cold case in Maine, the initials of a missing woman, Annabelle Jane Ross, who disappeared in 1981. He contacted authorities, who traced the painting's origin to a deceased art teacher. In his basement, police found more canvases, each depicting women in fear. DNA on the bristles matched multiple cold cases across the Northeast. The art wasn't imagination. It was confession. The girl buried with a secret. In a grave marked Jane Doe, a body was buried in 1989 after being found in a forest clearing. No ID. No leads. In 2021, a volunteer group working with cold case detectives pushed for the body to be exhumed for isotopic testing. The results pointed to water sources tied to a region in Canada. That narrowed the list of missing persons to just a handful. A match was made, Caroline Bent, 17, who'd vanished after a trip to the U.S. Her old letters mentioned a boyfriend named T. That led to one man, Toby Heller. A DNA test confirmed it. He was arrested 32 years after her murder, living just 20 miles from where she was buried. She had been right there all along. The ring that never left the pawn shop. Pawn shops see everything, sometimes even murder. In 1992, a woman named Lydia Proctor was found murdered, her engagement ring missing. In 2023, during a routine inventory audit, a pawnshop owner realized one of his oldest unclaimed rings matched the description from a decades-old case he'd seen on TV. He called the police. DNA inside the band matched a man named Ricky Paulson, who had pawned it days after Lydia's death. Ricky had served time for theft but never murder. When confronted, he asked one question: how the hell did that ring come back? The answer? Time. Time always circles back. The case cracked by a parrot. Yes, you read that right. In 2015, a woman named Gloria Wells was found dead in her home, her parrot perched on her shoulder, unharmed. The case went cold due to lack of evidence. But in 2023, her son adopted the bird and noticed it mimicking a phrase in a low male voice: "Don't scream, Gloria." He recorded it and sent it to police. They used voice analysis software and compared it to suspects from the original investigation. One match stood out: a former handyman. A search of his home uncovered Gloria's missing jewelry. When confronted, the parrot's mimicry was played back. He turned white and confessed. The bird had remembered everything. So did Justice, the man who returned to the scene. Every year on the anniversary of Maria Conlin's disappearance in 1985, a man was seen walking along the wooded trail where she was last spotted. Neighbors called him the ghost jogger. No one knew his name. In 2022, police set up motion cameras. They got a clear face. Ran it. No match. But when a detective traced the man's route, he found something: Maria's missing necklace, buried in the dirt just feet off the path. DNA on the clasp matched the jogger, a man who'd never been a suspect. When questioned, he confessed he returned every year, because that's where I lost everything. That's also where he was finally found. The Craigslist confession. In 2010, Jenna Brighton vanished after responding to an online ad for a vintage lamp. Her last message was to a friend: "Meeting the seller now." The meeting location was vague: an abandoned warehouse lot in Kansas City. Despite a massive search and dozens of leads, the case went cold. Then in 2023, a man posted on Craigslist under a pseudonym, seeking forgiveness from those I've hurt. An online sleuth connected the post to a username that had once listed the vintage lamp ad in 2010. Police tracked the IP, kicked in the door, and found the same lamp sitting in the corner. DNA confirmed the man as Jenna's killer. The same internet that lured Jenna to her death eventually led to justice. The grandma with the locked trunk. When 92-year-old Ellen Mathers passed away in Vermont, her family inherited an old Victorian home with a strange rule: never open the trunk in the attic. Curiosity won. Inside they found blood-stained clothes, jewelry, and most disturbingly, photos of a girl chained to a radiator. Police matched the items to a missing persons case from 1978. Ellen's late husband had worked for a traveling circus that once passed through the town where the girl vanished. DNA proved he abducted her and brought her home, where she died. Ellen knew. She kept the secret locked up, literally, for decades. But no secret stays buried forever. The bones in the chimney. Renovators gutting a fireplace in an old Chicago brownstone in 2022 discovered human bones wedged in the flue. The coroner estimated the remains were over 50 years old. A partial skull showed signs of blunt force trauma. A faded high school ring nearby led police to Arthur Dean, a teen who disappeared in 1968. His name had long been forgotten, until his bones made him impossible to ignore. An aging contractor, once questioned in Arthur's case, was found living in rural Indiana. He confessed in exchange for immunity due to terminal illness. His reason? Arthur caught me robbing the place. I panicked. One careless swing, a body stuffed into the chimney, and silence for half a century. Until that silence cracked brick by brick. The killer neighbor with the garden. Karen Ellis was 17 when she vanished in 1992. Her bike was found, but not her body. The case haunted the suburb where she lived. In 2021, the city launched a beautification initiative. A neighbor's garden, long admired for its vibrant flowers, was being repurposed for community space. During excavation, landscapers uncovered human remains. The garden had been Karen's grave. The neighbor, a retired biology teacher, was arrested the same day. His reason? She reminded me of someone. Her family wept in court, heartbroken that the man who'd waved to them for decades was her murderer, and that they'd unknowingly stood over her resting place all these years. The locket in the couch. At a Salvation Army thrift store, a donated couch held a locket in its cushion. Inside were photos of a young girl and an engraving, "To Ruthie, love always." An employee, touched by the locket's age, posted it online. A cold case volunteer matched the image to a girl who vanished in 1983. Ruthie Danners. A forensic genealogist helped trace the locket's journey from home to home. The couch's donor? A hospice nurse whose husband had lived in a now-abandoned home, the same one where Ruthie was last seen. Police searched the property and found her remains in a dry well, wrapped in sheets. The nurse's husband, now dead, was the killer. But her family finally buried her, thanks to a second-hand sofa and a stranger's compassion. The basement of dolls. In Milwaukee, a woman cleaning out her late uncle's house discovered something odd in the basement, a room filled with handmade dolls, each dressed in real, decaying children's clothes. Authorities were called when she found teeth inside one of the dolls. Forensic tests linked the items to missing children from the late 1970s. Her uncle had worked as a custodian at multiple elementary schools during that time. 3 cold cases were closed thanks to those dolls. Though the man was long dead, his legacy of horror was exposed, and families who'd waited for decades finally had the answers they never thought they'd receive. The bus ticket clue. Desmond Carter was 14 when he vanished after school in 1995. A backpack, a few notebooks, and a half-eaten candy bar were found on the sidewalk. The case froze for decades. Then in 2022, a retired transit clerk digitized old bus records and found something strange. A bus ticket logged under Desmond's student ID number, used hours after his disappearance. The route ended at a trailer park across state lines. Police reopened the case, and skeletal remains were discovered in a nearby ravine. The killer was a former bus driver who'd targeted vulnerable teens. A clerical record buried in a filing cabinet became the keystone of justice. The girl in the ice. A hiker in Alaska stumbled upon a human leg jutting from a melting glacier. Park rangers arrived and uncovered a nearly intact body preserved in the ice. Dental records identified her as Emily Shaw, a 20-year-old woman who vanished during a solo trip in 1982. Authorities suspected foul play even then, but no leads surfaced. New forensics showed signs of trauma inconsistent with a fall. She'd been strangled. The killer turned out to be a backcountry tour guide who was now in his 70s, still operating in the region. He confessed, saying, "I thought the ice would take her forever." But time, even frozen time, thaws. The wedding video clue. In 1994, Lila Griggs was last seen leaving a wedding reception. Her case went nowhere, until a guest digitizing old VHS footage in 2023 noticed something chilling. In the background of a dance clip, Lila is arguing with a man who was never identified in the original investigation. Facial recognition software matched him to a man who'd later moved to Oregon and changed his name. When police brought him in, he cracked. "We were fighting. I didn't mean to," he'd buried her on private land hours after the wedding. One moment, captured on grainy film, turned into undeniable evidence. A single frame solved a 30-year mystery. The child with the note in the shoe. In 2001, the body of a young boy was discovered near a rest stop in Colorado. No ID, no missing persons match, no leads. He became known as Rest Stop Johnny. In 2022, during a re-examination of his shoes, a folded note was discovered beneath the sole lining. It read, "My name is Liam. Please help." The name led to a missing child report filed under a different last name in Texas. The note cracked open a forgotten paper trail of abuse, custody battles, and a runaway mother with a violent boyfriend. The boyfriend was arrested, still living under an alias, and charged with murder. The boy finally had his name back. His mother wept and said, he tried to save himself. The lottery ticket trail. In 1993, Deborah French disappeared after buying groceries and a scratch-off ticket. She never made it home. Her car was found abandoned, her groceries still in the trunk. 30 years later, a lottery commission in turn digitizing old records discovered her winning ticket had been cashed by someone else. The signature didn't match Deborah's. Surveillance from a nearby pawn shop showed a man resembling a former store clerk. That clerk, now a trucker in Ohio, was arrested and confessed. She came in to cash it. I wanted it more than she did. Greed. One small ticket unraveled a cold case and brought justice through a spreadsheet. The case solved by a dog collar. In 1987, a woman jogging in Utah was found strangled. Her German Shepherd was lying beside her body, injured. The leash was missing. The case went unsolved. In 2022, a flea market in Nevada sold a vintage leather dog collar with a strange engraving, "Daisy, protect her." A woman bought it and posted a photo online. A cold case officer recognized the phrase. It had been mentioned in the victim's diary. DNA from the collar's leather, preserved in dryness, matched a former suspect. The collar had been taken as a twisted souvenir. It ended up being the thing that broke the case. The photo booth killer. In 1986, 3 teens went missing after a county fair in Ohio. Their last known location was a popular photo booth on the fairgrounds. No leads. No suspects. In 2023, a retired officer cleaning out evidence archives rediscovered a strip of photo negatives labeled Fair, September '86. They'd never been developed. When processed, the photos revealed a chilling image, the teens in the booth, smiling, while a man loomed in the background just outside the curtain. Facial recognition software later identified him as a Fair employee who died in 2002. A search of his abandoned property revealed their remains in a sealed well. The photo booth became both a time capsule and a witness. The case of the paper cranes. Every year on the anniversary of her daughter's disappearance, Mrs. Nolan received a handmade paper crane in the mail. No return address. No message. Just the same delicate fold year after year, from 1989 to 2021. It haunted her. She kept them all. In 2022, a high school student studying origami noticed the cranes had a unique fold. Only taught by one master in the U.S. Police traced the style to a former Japanese instructor who had lived near the Nolans decades earlier. When questioned, he confessed. The cranes were his way of remembering, repenting. DNA later matched him to the crime. The truth unfolded, just like the paper birds. The dollhouse blueprint. In Detroit, a collector bought an elaborate antique dollhouse at an estate sale. While examining its miniature rooms, she noticed something odd. Each layout matched a real home from local missing persons cases. One room even included a replica of a famous unsolved crime scene from 1979. Alarmed, she contacted authorities. A task force pieced together addresses and dates, uncovering a disturbing pattern. The seller's late father, an unassuming handyman, had built the dollhouse as a twisted tribute to his crimes. Beneath the floorboards of his actual home, police found human remains. One collector's curiosity brought closure to 6 families. The toothbrush trap. In 2003, 10-year-old Isaiah Fields vanished from his foster home in Louisiana. The case grew cold, though suspicions surrounded the foster parents. In 2022, a new detective used a leftover toothbrush from the home to test for DNA, not for Isaiah's, but for anyone else's. The test revealed the DNA of a long-missing child who had disappeared 2 years before Isaiah. Investigators dug deeper and discovered both boys had been killed by the same foster mother, who had moved and changed names. Surveillance, metadata, and digital forensics closed the loop. A simple toothbrush solved 2 disappearances and ended a cycle of abuse. The clue in the drywall. Renovators updating a kitchen in Atlanta found a plastic-wrapped bundle inside the wall cavity. Inside, a bloody sweatshirt and a wallet. The ID belonged to William Green, who'd gone missing in 1995. The homeowners had bought the house in 2000, unaware of its past. DNA testing led police to the previous owner, a quiet man who had since moved to North Carolina. Faced with evidence, he broke. William had found out about an affair and threatened to expose it. The killer struck, hid the body elsewhere, and entombed the evidence inside his own walls. Time may have hidden it, but drywall doesn't last forever. The AI face generator lead. In a first-of-its-kind case, police used an AI facial reconstruction tool in 2023 to recreate the appearance of a skull found in Nevada in 1991. The rendering was posted online. Within 72 hours, a woman from Arkansas recognized the face as her missing cousin Gina. Police reopened the case and used family DNA to confirm the identity. The AI had accurately estimated age, ethnicity, and bone structure. From there, authorities linked the death to a known serial offender active in the area during the 90s. It was a blend of cutting-edge technology and human memory that finally broke a case older than many of today's investigators. The church basement skeleton. While preparing for renovations at a church in New Hampshire, volunteers discovered bones beneath the foundation. Tests revealed the skeleton had belonged to a young woman murdered in the late 1970s. For decades, she had been missing with no leads. A ring engraved with initials, long considered a minor detail, was matched to a stolen family heirloom listed in a decades-old robbery. That burglary had been linked to a former choir member who had disappeared around the same time. Police tracked down his children, now adults, who turned over an old journal their father kept. It detailed the crime in horrifying clarity. The daughter wept, saying, "We never knew he was capable of this." The victim was finally laid to rest, with hymns sung above the spot where her body had lain in silence for over 40 years. The Facebook tag that solved a crime. When a woman tagged an old classmate in a Throwback Thursday Facebook post, she didn't know she was triggering the final piece in a 25-year-old puzzle. In the background of the photo was a man known as Dave, who turned out to be wanted in another state for questioning in the 1997 disappearance of a college student. The tag led investigators down a digital trail of old social media activity, school newsletters, and geotagged posts. They found the man living under a new name in Idaho. DNA matched him to the crime scene, and the victim's family, who had long feared she'd been forgotten, finally got justice. One photo. One tag. That's all it took. The Silent Witness, a Polaroid camera. In 1989, a young woman named Sarah went missing after visiting a motel during a cross-country road trip. Her car was found, but not her body. A Polaroid camera was discovered at the scene with no film inside. In 2022, that camera resurfaced in an estate sale. An amateur photographer, curious, managed to restore one frame using modern digital imaging. What it revealed was chilling. Sarah, frightened, tied to a motel chair. The motel owner's brother, long considered eccentric but harmless, had passed away recently. Police uncovered more evidence in his crawlspace. A hidden film strip. Sarah's remains nearby. One image developed after 33 years gave her a voice from beyond. From faded photographs to notes in shoes, dollhouses to old bus tickets, each of these cases reminds us that the truth never dies, it only waits to be found. Every cold case solved brings a grieving family one step closer to peace. Justice may be slow, but it's never too late. Which of these cases shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're hungry for more jaw-dropping true crime stories, check out our video on 10 unsolved cases that still baffle investigators. You won't believe how close some of them are to being solved.